I'm Marcus Thompson, and in 15 years leading rescue operations across East Africa, I've made thousands of decisions under pressure. But there's one moment that still haunts me, when a magnificent rhino collapsed in front of our team, and everyone looked to me to make a choice that would define not just that animal's fate, but everything I believed about conservation, leadership, and the value of life. If you've ever been in a position where people are counting on you to make an impossible decision, you'll understand this story. Share in the comments if you've faced moments where there were no easy answers. Sometimes these experiences teach us the most about who we really are. This happened 15 months ago during what should have been a routine rhino health monitoring operation in the Ol Pejeta Conservancy. What started as preventive care became the most challenging ethical decision of my conservation career. This is case file number 174. And I'm sharing this story because leadership isn't about always knowing the right answer. It's about making the best decision possible with incomplete information and living with the consequences of that choice. Subscribe if you want more honest stories about the real challenges of wildlife conservation, including the moments when even experienced teams face situations that test every principle we hold about protecting animals. The call came from Dr. Richard Veen, the Conservancy's CEO, whose decades of rhino conservation experience made his concern immediately significant. His voice carried the weight of someone who understood both the individual value of every rhino and the species' critical conservation status. Marcus, we need immediate intervention for Uhuru, one of our northern white rhino surrogates. She's showing signs of distress during routine monitoring, and her condition appears to be deteriorating rapidly. This isn't just any rhino, Marcus. Uhuru is carrying genetic material that's crucial for northern white rhino conservation efforts. Her health directly impacts one of the most important species preservation projects in the world. Northern white rhino conservation represents the cutting edge of species preservation science. With only 2 northern white rhinos remaining in the world, surrogate mothers like Uhuru carry the genetic future of an entire subspecies. Dr. Veen, what specific symptoms are we seeing? Labored breathing, unusual posture, and she's not responding normally to her caretakers. Given her importance to the conservation program, we can't take any risks with delayed intervention. I assembled our most experienced team for this critical operation. Sarah, our veterinarian, had worked with rhinos before, and Mike's equipment would be essential for safely approaching and treating such a large, potentially distressed animal. This case carries enormous responsibility, I explained to the team during our flight. Uhuru's health impacts not just her individual welfare, but potentially the future of an entire subspecies. Every decision we make has implications beyond this single animal. Sarah was reviewing rhino physiology and the specific medical considerations for surrogate mothers carrying precious genetic material. Marcus, the stress of intervention itself could be dangerous for her condition. We need to balance immediate care with long-term preservation goals. Mike was preparing specialized equipment for large rhino medical procedures. Boss, I've got our most advanced monitoring systems and gentle restraint options. The goal is providing necessary care while minimizing stress that could affect her conservation role. When we arrived at Ol Pejeta, Dr. Veen's team had Uhuru under constant observation. The sight of this magnificent rhino, clearly in distress, immediately highlighted the gravity of our situation. Uhuru was indeed showing concerning symptoms: irregular breathing, unusual positioning, and a lack of response to environmental stimuli that suggested significant medical distress requiring immediate evaluation. Her condition has worsened since this morning, Dr. Veen reported. She's not eating, barely drinking, and her caretakers report she's been making distress vocalizations throughout the night. The initial assessment required careful approach techniques designed to evaluate her condition without increasing stress. Rhinos are sensitive to human presence, especially when they're not feeling well. Sarah's expertise proved crucial during the preliminary examination. Marcus, her vital signs are concerning. Heart rate is elevated, breathing is labored, and she's showing signs of significant internal distress. As Sarah continued her examination, using non-invasive techniques to gather as much information as possible, Uhuru's condition became increasingly clear and increasingly serious. This appears to be a severe internal complication, Sarah reported with growing concern. Based on her symptoms and response patterns, we're looking at a condition that requires immediate surgical intervention. The complexity of the situation became overwhelming. Uhuru needed emergency surgery to save her life, but such an invasive procedure carried enormous risks for both her survival and her role in the northern white rhino conservation program. Dr. Veen gathered our team for an emergency consultation. We're facing an impossible choice. Without surgery, Uhuru will almost certainly die. With surgery, we risk losing both her and the genetic material she's carrying. That's when everything changed. As we discussed options, Uhuru suddenly collapsed onto her side, breathing becoming even more labored, and making distress calls that cut straight through every team member's heart. In that moment, with this magnificent animal suffering in front of us, my entire team turned to look at me. Sarah, Mike, Dr. Veen, and the Conservancy staff, all waiting for me to make the decision that could save or lose one of the world's most important rhinos. If you've ever felt the weight of making a decision that affects not just one life, but potentially the future of an entire species, share your thoughts in the comments. These moments test everything we believe about leadership and responsibility. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Uhuru's distressed breathing filled the air while everyone waited for my decision about emergency surgery that could save her life or end her conservation role forever. I looked at Sarah, whose medical expertise was clear about the necessity of intervention. I looked at Dr. Veen, whose conservation experience understood the broader implications. I looked at Uhuru, suffering in front of us. "We operate," I said, making the hardest decision of my career. "We can't let her suffer for the sake of a conservation program. Her individual welfare has to come first, regardless of the broader implications." Sarah's relief was visible as she immediately began preparing emergency surgical protocols. "Marcus, this is the right choice. We can't preserve a species by allowing individual animals to suffer when we have the ability to help." The emergency surgery required perfect coordination and innovative techniques. Operating on a rhino in field conditions while maintaining sterile procedures and monitoring vital signs pushed every aspect of our medical capabilities. "Surgical site prepared," Sarah reported as she worked with incredible skill and precision. "Initial examination confirms our diagnosis. This intervention was absolutely necessary to save her life." Mike's equipment proved crucial for maintaining safe conditions during the complex procedure. "All monitoring systems stable, boss. Her vital signs are responding positively to the surgical intervention." The surgery took 3 hours of intense concentration and careful technique. Sarah's expertise, combined with Dr. Veen's rhino-specific knowledge, created the perfect team for this unprecedented procedure. "Surgery complete," Sarah announced with exhausted relief. "Initial indicators are positive. She's responding well to treatment and the condition has been successfully addressed." The recovery phase required constant monitoring and careful post-operative care. Rhinos heal differently than smaller animals, and the stress of surgery could have complications we needed to watch for continuously. Over the following hours, Uhuru's improvement was remarkable. Her breathing normalized, vital signs stabilized, and she began responding to her caretakers in ways that indicated reduced pain and discomfort. "Perfect recovery response," Dr. Veen reported after 24 hours. "She's eating normally, interacting with staff, and showing all the behaviors of a healthy rhino. The surgery was completely successful." But the broader implications remained uncertain. The surgery had saved Uhuru's life, but we wouldn't know for weeks whether her role in the northern white rhino conservation program had been affected. 3 weeks later, we received the news that validated every aspect of our decision. Uhuru had not only recovered completely, but her conservation role remained intact and successful. "The genetic material she's carrying remains viable," Dr. Veen reported during our follow-up visit. Her surgery actually improved her overall health, making her an even better candidate for the conservation program. Case file RR 174 taught me that true conservation leadership means prioritizing individual animal welfare, even when broader program considerations create pressure to make different choices. I now approach every medical emergency with the clear principle that individual animal suffering requires immediate intervention, regardless of conservation politics or program implications. Sarah has become our lead specialist in emergency rhino surgery, and her techniques from this operation have been adopted by conservation programs across Africa. This case reinforced my belief that conservation succeeds when we treat every animal as an individual worthy of care, not just as a representative of their species. But here's what really validated our decision. Watching Uhuru thrive in the months following her surgery, contributing to conservation efforts while living a healthy, comfortable life free from the suffering she experienced that day. The ripple effects of case number 174 extended throughout the conservation community. Our decision to prioritize individual welfare over program considerations has influenced policy discussions about ethics in species preservation work. This case also strengthened relationships with conservation partners who saw that our team's commitment to animal welfare extends to the most challenging situations and complex ethical decisions. Case file NUBRA 174 influenced every subsequent rescue we've conducted, including the ethical frameworks that guide our medical interventions and the principles that determine our approach to complex conservation cases. Subscribe if you want more stories about the ethical challenges in wildlife conservation, the moments when protecting animals requires making difficult decisions that test every principle we hold about conservation work. If you want me to share more stories about conservation ethics and difficult decisions, especially cases where individual animal welfare conflicts with broader conservation goals, or the amazing recoveries that validate difficult medical interventions, let me know which ethical challenge you'd like to explore next. These stories prove that wildlife conservation requires not just scientific expertise, but moral courage to make decisions that prioritize animal welfare even when the stakes extend far beyond individual animals. Which conservation ethics story should I share next? Your comments help me choose which cases will be most valuable for understanding the complex moral decisions that define responsible wildlife conservation work.